In this Lottie animation, Introduction to After Effects and using Lottie out there on the web, we're going to animate this island. And maybe we'll add this critter to this island. I'm not sure yet. Let's get this AI file into After Effects, convert it to shapes, get a little animation going, and then just get it working on the web and think about whether or not this sleeping critter deserves to be in our animation. Going to After Effects, File Import, and importing a file. And the most important part when importing a file, when it's an Illustrator file, .ai file, is the import type. And let me choose my island. If you want to see all the layers as separate pieces of art and a composition made exactly the same size as the composition in Illustrator, make sure not to choose footage. That kind of like flattens the file out. If you want flexibility, the ability to animate vectors and have rasterized, crisp graphics in After Effects in general, this is the right setting. Composition retain layer sizes. And click on Open. So new composition, and you can think of composition as a grouping of all that information, all the timelines that might exist within here. And that's what a composition has within it. Lots of timelines, lots of assets. I'm going to double click in Island. And here's our island image, not animated yet. Now, normally being After Effects, I would just go and animate all this as is, using the Illustrator layers to animate things. Since this is going to be a Lottie animation, I want to convert this to shapes. The shapes will contain the vector paths. That this Illustrator artwork, I can edit it back in Illustrator, but it's not the vector paths right here. And to convert this tree and everything else, just right click on a layer, select create, and create and convert shapes. And if you can't see that, let me just drag that. Let me drag this screen a little higher so this way it doesn't fall off my video recording. Right click. Still will fall off. How about that? Well, let me just go to the other menus, which is just a regular click and going down to create shapes from vector layers. And the only reason I went up to layers because right clicking made the menu fall off the screen, and I'm sharing this so I don't want you to not know which menu it is. Once I do that, I could throw away my Illustrator layer. I'm going to repeat this for all these layers. So layer, create, shape, delete, and a few more layers to go. Layer, create from shape, delete. Now, if you're just working with After Effects, one reason you might want to do this is so you have no dependencies. This way you could send someone the file, not worrying that you didn't send them the Illustrator file. Another great reason, because you can do a lot of effects on a shape layer that you can't just do on the vector layer that's coming directly from Illustrator without conversion. Gives you lots of potential. We're almost there. Layer, create, last one. Now, the type of animation I'm doing right now, I didn't need to convert it. Doing this for Lottie's sake, for creating smaller file sizes and having the ability to animate it. So it's a good process. I'm going to click on this tree. The pivot point for the tree, and I'm using the scroll wheel to scroll on in. You could also use the magnifying glass up here if you wanted. But I'm interested in the pivot point. In animation, pivot point, center of mass, whatever you want to call it, right? That determines the transformation center of a piece of art. So if I scale, it's going to scale around there. Don't want that to happen. I just want a slight rotation on each tree. So I'm going to pick up this pan behind tool, which is also the anchor point tool. I have snapping on, and I'm just going to drag that center mass right down there, that transformation. I'm going to turn off snapping so I could just nudge it over a little bit. I'll do the same thing for the tree, and I'll drag its center right down here. I think those are the only two objects I'm going to have rotate. Now I'm holding the same tool and I want to stop panning things, so pick up the move tool, which is shortcut the V key. All right, mention I'm just gonna have these two trees animate and then think about adding other things into the animation. Starting from here, I could click this triangle and this triangle to expose all the transformations. I mentioned this could be a rotation, R key. And I'll do the same thing for this layer, R key. A nice property of After Effects, I select all these layers and just click on one stopwatch and I'll add keys for everything that's selected. So much like the last animation, I want this to loop in the simplest way without using the scripts and without doing anything with time remapping either. So I'm just adding now these keys right here. My first keys were added using the stopwatch that activates the track for being animated. And then this one, this icon adds or removes keys. So much like before, it stops and starts or starts and stops in the same place. I'll go back to frame 75. And again, you could press the command key and just walk over the playback head to frame 75 by using the left and right arrow with the command key pressed. And I'll select both of these rotations, but you could do one at a time. Maybe they want to be unique. Don't rotate this first number. This first number represents how many times around 360 to go, forward or backwards, clockwise, counterclockwise. Now I just want it to go a little tilt this way. And let's look at our animation. And then it'll come on back. All right. Let me go here. And I'll maybe make the other one sway the other way. Now that mechanicalness that's happening in the center is due to the type of easing that's going on here. Right now, it's probably a linear ease, or it should be a linear ease. I can select each keyframe individually or shift click on both of them. It's off the screen again, so let me move this up. Right click, keyframe assistant, and even though this is better done through the graph editor, let's just do a nice easy ease. And we're doing that, and see how the keyframe changes. We're doing that. So the keyframe icon change, and it's to represent the type of, now the animation won't look so mechanical. Right, it slows into position and sways on back. And we could do the same thing for the end keys as well. So this way the animation is a lot smoother. So I'll select these two keys, right click, and keyframe assistant. So you can see it, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and I'll do the same thing with the last two, so selecting them both by holding down the shift key and clicking on both the keyframes, right click. Oops, and I know it's off screen, but I am selecting easy ease again. Now let's take a look at the animation. So it slows down at the edges when it's going into that bigger V shape and now coming back together again. So it's much smoother, softer transition instead of that mechanical one. We could keep on animating elements. We could also bring in that critter. Should we bring in the critter? Well, let's animate the waves first. Here's the waves. And I'm going to just use a scale to make them scale on out and fade out at the same time. Going to frame 0, pressing S for scale, putting a keyframe there, and want this to loop. And this one, it's not going to loop this way. It's just going to loop by fading in. So what if this is 100%, and then this just scales bigger? Let's look at it. It scales out of frame. Let's take a look at this animation. Press the space bar. And now we'll see a snap as the waves appear again. And snap again. Let's get rid of some of that abrupt snapness of it. I'm going to this frame and I'll press the T key for opacity, or you could just open up the transforms opacity. What if at this frame opacity was 0? And then it fades up across, let's say, 20 frames to 100%. So it's a much softer transition when the waves show up. It's not as abrupt. Right? We could continue animating the different elements this way. Let's get that critter in here. I don't know if the critter's going to do much, but it's good to show that things could be separate files that you bring in. File, import file. Select critter.ai. Import as. Composition retain layer sizes. Open. Now I'm going in the critter, and here's its various sizes. I'm going to select all these layers and go under layer, create shapes from vector layer, and does it all at once, unlike the first time when I was showing a lesson and did them one at a time. And I could delete every other one, and that's the Illustrator icon. So I can animate this critter within the critter composition itself. Maybe its head rocks back and forth. I'm going to move the pivot point, selecting this icon, move the pivot point right there. Move tool again, so this way I'm not moving pivot points. And let's do the rotation. R key. Stopwatch, first keyframe, and it ends up maybe here again. You know what? I don't think it starts out there. I think its head starts out a little lower, like this. Okay, so I'm back at frame 0, and I rotated the head -10 degrees. At the other end of time, it'll return to -10 degrees, so I'll click right here to add that keyframe. Somewhere around frame, you guessed it, 75. Maybe it goes up to 10 degrees. 10 would be a little high. Let's say 5 degrees. Let's look at the animation. Right, it's softly sleeping. Random creature on island. Just like before, let me select all these keys. Shift click, shift click, shift click. Right click. Keyframe Assistant, and let me raise this one more time. Right click, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And let's look at our creature. It's just happily resting on its little island. All right, back to the main island composition. Clicking here, click, click. We're almost ready to export this. I'm going to add this critter layer above all the island layers. Maybe I'll put it behind the tree, above the tree. So I'll drag this critter composition. First, I'll drag it above all the other layers. Whoa, critter's a lot bigger. Well, I could make it smaller by holding down the shift key like this, but why not have a big critter hang out on the island? It deserves to rest. Its tail's in the water. Oh, look, it snores in time with the other part of the animation. Didn't want that to happen. We could offset the other animation in the critter or offset this animation. Since this is really a Lottie video, we'll leave it as is. Now, if I wanted this critter to be behind the trees, I could just take that critter composition and just drag it behind the 2 tree layers. Whoops, that must hurt. Sorry, critter. Let me just lift this critter up by clicking on its layer and just saying, all right, you're behind the trees. You're hiding, right? No one sees you. Oops, that goes in its eye. Don't want that. We could offset the critter as well, so it's hiding again. Maybe it should be hiding behind the bush as well. And I could drag that behind the iron layer. Now it's out to sea. Let me drag it to the top layer again, so it's in front of everything else, and drag this. Remember, I'm using the move tool to move things around. I think that's enough playing with this animation for now. All right, save your file, of course. I'm selecting the island composition that contains the island and now the critter as its own little composition. So you learn that compositions can contain animation. If I wanted this to Z twice as fast, I could play with these keys by doubling them up, but that's not the purpose of this video. So the last step will be to export this, going under Window, Extension, Body Moving. Wait for that window to pop up. I'm going to click on this island. I'm going to deselect this one. Select the path to save it to locally. This time I'm saving it directly in my web folder. If you're working on websites and doing other things, you shouldn't save directly into that web structure to have your artwork separate until you're ready, until it's ready for production, and then you dump it into the folder. Here's just a quick lesson, so let me just name this island. Save, replace, since I did this before. Now you would click on render. It's doing its magic. You could preview it, but let's say everything went perfectly, hopefully. All you would have to do is go back to your HTML file. Now it's already working. You already tested it with a different Lottie file. You set up your controllers, the default controllers. You can see the link in description to the website that can tell you more about the player embedding. And instead of calling out the circle, I want the island. So it's always a good idea to get something simple working. Get something simple working, and then go for something a little more complex and up the game each time. Back to Chrome, and there's our island animation with our little sleeping critter. I see a little blinking at the very end because my waves didn't make it to the edge, so I'm going to make those waves also fade out as it reaches the edge, so we won't see that little abrupt blinking out. It's a good thing. That process is pretty simple. Go to the wave layer, T for transparency. So I have this being transparent, and it's only because my zoom was a little close I didn't notice it. I'm holding down the Option middle mouse button and drag this up. You'd also use the hand tool right there as the icon, but this is shortcut Option middle mouse button or Alt middle mouse button if you're on a PC. All right, so there's our opacity going 100%. And then let's say by frame 120, I'll add a key, keeping it at 100% from here to here, and then fading out down to 0%. And that will get rid of the blinking. Save this file. I'll make my Lottie file again by going under Extension, Body Moving. With this layer selected, click on Render. And that's it. Hit Done. And when I go back to the web page, there's the animation already working, fading out. Now it's already fading out. I don't have to hit refresh because I'm running a local server thanks to Atom. If you didn't install the Atom plugin, the plugin you're looking for in Atom is under Packages, Atom Live Server Plus. And that allows you to develop locally. Hope you enjoyed this video and enjoyed the zenness of the sleeping critter on the island and how you could get started using Lottie files and creating with After Effects animations for the web.